Good evening, everyone. I think we're good to go. Be starting momentarily. Namo tassa bhagavato arahato sama sambuddhassa. Namo tassa bhagavato arahato sama sambuddhassa. Namo tassa bhagavato arahato sama sambuddhassa. So today I'm going to focus on the Suddhāvāsa, the pure abodes. These are the places where anagamis go to, where they go upon their death. Anagami is the third stage of awakening, and they've overcome all the lower fetters, but there still remains they're not purely perfected, they're not arahants yet. There still remains the defilement of bhavatanha, desire to be. But since they've utterly transcended sensuality, they can't be reborn in any of the sensual heavens or on earth. So they take their birth in this special realm that's classified as part of the Rupa Bhumi. But before we discuss the Suddhāvāsa in more detail, I want to mention one more odd corner of the cosmos that's classified also as part of the Rupa Bhumi, and this is the realm of the Sannyasata, the unconscious beings. This is a realm in which some yogis from the Buddha's time who were non-Buddhists, who had developed deep meditation, but they had the false view that happiness is to be found by the complete eradication of consciousness and perception. So they're kind of a version of annihilationist or nihilist. And upon their death, they're reborn into this special realm where they have no consciousness at all. They sit like statues and are completely unaware of the passage of time. And hundreds of kappas can go by before they fall from that realm. There was one story about one of the Buddha's disciples who recalled a past life in that realm, and the only thing he remembered was the first and last moments with 500 kappas in between. And he said the 500 kappas passed by like an instant. I think the closest experience that we can have in an ordinary existence to that is being under total anesthesia. If any of you have experienced that, I was under total anesthesia once for an operation, and my experience was that the anesthesiast put the mask over my face with the gas and told me to count backwards from 10. And 10, 9, 8, 7. And then I opened my eyes and I'm in the recovery room. It was quite remarkable and very different from being asleep. It doesn't matter how deeply you sleep, when you wake up, there's some sense of time having passed, but this was completely different from that. It was like one moment I'm on the operating table counting backwards, and the very next moment, although more than an hour had passed in the rest of the universe, I was waking up on the recovery in the recovery room. Um, what this means for in either case is that there is a separate sequence for ordinary time and for mental time. This is explained in the Abhidhamma, that each moment of consciousness as its proximate cause the preceding moment of consciousness. And in the ordinary run of things, it could be compared to dominoes falling down. One immediately is the cause of the next. However, in the case of the asanya satta beings, there might be hundreds of kappas between the fall of the dominoes. But from their subjective point of view, no time has passed at all. But the last moment of consciousness before entering that realm is still the proximate cause of the first moment emerging from that realm. So the chain of consciousness moments is not broken, it's just on a different time sequence than the rest of the universe. Turning now to the main theme, the Suddhāvāsa, beings. They're classified as being in the Rupa Bhumi, which is the realm of the Brahmas, and some passages equate their existence, like the Vipapala Brahmas, as being related to fourth jhana, but this does not mean that they're in fourth jhana all the time, because we do have incidents of them in the stories. We do have incidents of them reacting and acting and speaking, which they're not absorbed in fourth jhana all the time. They have some connection with the Buddha in several ways. Most interesting, I think, is at the beginning of a new world system, after the old world system is destroyed, the new one comes into being. Once the level of the earth begins to form, the first living thing that arises on the surface of the earth is a lotus flower at the site of the Bodhi Mandala. This is the spot near Bodh Gaya in our geography where all the Buddhas attain enlightenment. And it's considered to be the most sacred place in the cosmos. It's also called the navel of the world. At first the earth is all flooded, and the flooding recedes, and then in a muddy patch at the Bodhi Mandala, a lotus flower appears. And when this happens, devas from the Suddhāvāsa come down to investigate, and by examining the lotus plant, they can determine how many Buddhas will arise in this world age, in this kappa. And there may be as many as 5, or there might be none at all, or anything in between. If there are lotus buds, then they rejoice. They say that there will be a Buddha arising in this world. If there is not, then they say, alas, alas, this world will be a world of darkness. There will be no Buddhas, and few will be reborn into the higher realms. The lower realms will be full. Then they take the lotus buds, and they remove them and take them back up to their realm and keep them in a stupa as treasured relics until the time of the Buddha arising in the world and going forth, and he makes his great renunciation. Then one of the Suddhāvāsa devas will appear before the Buddha with the lotus bud in his hand. The lotus bud will open, and inside will be the requisites of a bhikkhu, the robe and bowl and a sewing needle and water strainer, and he will present these to the bodhisattva. There's also a story about the Buddha at one time going up to visit the Suddhāvāsa realm, because he reflected, in all my wanderings through samsara, I recall all my previous births, but I've never yet been in the Suddhāvāsa realm, which makes sense because only anagamis are born there, and if he'd become an anagami, he would have eventually attained arahantship there and not been reborn to become a Buddha. So he goes up to the Suddhāvāsa realms, and he's greeted by the devas. They crowd around and say, "Long has it been since we saw a Buddha here?" So we see that in these sorts of stories that the Suddhāvāsa beings are not constantly absorbed in jhana, but they do interact and act and speak in the world. There is some uncertainty about the identification of Sahampati, the Brahma who advised the Buddha or implored the Buddha to not remain under the Bodhi tree, but to go forth and teach. And there's some indication that he may be a Suddhāvāsa Brahma, but there are other passages that seem to indicate that he's the Mahabrahma of this world. My own consideration of this is that probably was a first level Brahma, a Mahabrahma. Now, the Suddhāvāsa realm, there are 5 separate levels of of this realm: Aviha, Atapa, Sudasa, Sudasi, Akanita. It's not clear from the early Pali texts why there's 5 and why this number and what distinguishes where they're going to be reborn. But there is a passage in the Sarvastivadin Abhidharma Kosha that relates the 5 levels to the 5 faculties, the 5 indriya, and depending on whichever faculty is the strongest in an anagami, it will determine where he's born. So, for example, if one has the faculty of faith, saddha, he's born into the aviha realm, which is the lowest, the first and the lowest. And if he has the faculty of panya or wisdom, he's born in akinita, which is the highest. The akinita, the name of that realm means not a junior would be a very literal translation. And it's the very peak and summit of embodied beings in samsara. There's so it's sometimes just used in a passage that's meant to encompass the whole of samsara. We'll we'll say from Avicii hell to Akanita heaven and everything in between. An anagami can be reborn into one of these realms, and their lifespan is very, very long, into the hundreds of kappas. Even at the highest level, the Akanita, they can have a lifespan of 16,000 kappas. That's the longest lifespan anywhere. And when they pass away from one of the lower realms, if they haven't attained arahantship, they can be reborn to a next level higher, but they never reborn lower. So if they're in Suddhāvāsa number 2, they don't attain arahantship, then their next life might likely be in number 3, but they never fall back down. And eventually they attain arahantship, and then they may persist for a time. They may continue to live in that realm as an arahant until their time runs out, and then they enter parinibbana. So this idea of the Suddhāvāsa, it's very likely historically that it's the origin of the later Pure Land school of Buddhism that made the goal of the practice to be reborn into the Pure Land. The meaning of Suddhāvāsa is a pure abode or pure dwelling. So it's very very similar, parallel to that. So I'll stop there with the formal remarks on the Suddhāvāsa realms, and we'll see what we have in the chat for discussion here. Having some trouble seeing it. Hang on. That's better. Okay. Yes, Shashank says the audio volume is good. Yes, thank you. Shashank has been helping me with tweaking the software, the OBS software, to get the best results. They are not much suffering in that realm, are they? No, they're not suffering as such because they're not conscious. It's like a complete blank for a number of time. Do the Theravada quantize time? Is liberation a flash in one instant, like a click? Okay, that's an interesting question. It's 2 parts. Do the Theravada quantize time? I would say the Abhidhamma definitely does. It sees time in terms of a succession of discrete moments. So there is like a minimal time, a quanta of time. Is the second part, is liberation a flash in one instant? The actual transition proceeds through a number of mind moments in a specific sequence, but the actual transition in the end is, yes, it's a momentary occurrence. Greetings from the South American rainforest. Oh, great. I love the jungle in Thailand. You gotta watch out though for all kinds of, I imagine it's maybe even worse in South America for poisonous things, snakes and scorpions and whatnot. The hierarchical order of the first 3 pure abodes is confusing. The Vehapala are conscious yet being superior to it, Anyasata is not, and the next superior being Avida is conscious. Can you help me understand this curious oscillation? I don't think you can make too much out of that. I think that the placement of the asaññata beings is rather arbitrary. It may just be determined by length of lifespan. It definitely doesn't mean they're to be considered superior to the Vihapala beings in any real way. Next question: Our every action, whether volitional or not, affects the world, even in small amounts, creating a tiny ripple in the ongoing causal chain of events. But we, as a part of that causal chain, only experience the results of our volitional actions. Why do you think this is, Bhante? Because of the linear chain of cause and effect, that you need to get into the Abhidhamma explanation of karma to make sense of it. When we, you're quite right, we make every action creates some sort of ripple in the universe. But there's an oscillation in the mind between volitional moments when we're making the ripples and resultant moments when we receive the result of the ripple. And from the point of view of one being, that's a one-to-one relationship. Although obviously our actions have effects beyond ourselves. In terms of karma, it's a one-to-one. Can I dedicate merit to two causes at once, one selfish and one unselfish? For example, I dedicate this merit to all petas in myself. May the petas receive happiness and just study the Dhamma. May I be reborn in Tawatingsa with a palace filled with achara. Yeah, there's no limitation when you on the dedicating of merit. You can have more than one object in the dedication. We call Nibbana unconditioned, but wouldn't it be more accurate to say Nibbana is not conditioned, not unconditioned, not conditioned, unconditioned? No, it's unconditioned. We can't, can't really play with that tetralemma here. It's called unconditioned to asankata, to distinguish it clearly from the conditioned. What do you think about a do or die approach to enlightenment nowadays for a layperson or monk? Viable? I don't know if I don't know anybody who's really. It's very rare for someone to really have that absolute do or die approach like the Buddha on his the night of his enlightenment. He said, "I want to sit here until I either attain enlightenment or dwindle away to a pile of bones." I think it's meant to be more of like an impossible aspiration to encourage us to make a strong effort. Is kama vipaka the inertia accompanying each moment, shaping the present state of body, mind, and cetana? For if we assume the cause at a moment can create effect at any moment other than the direct following one, then on to the next, and so on, thus participating in an evolving chain. It's like a domino piece being suddenly pushed by another piece that steps behind. The effect of a karma is not necessarily going to reach fruition in the next moment or even in this lifetime, because there are other contributing factors that have to come into play. when you create a karma, what you're really creating is a potential. So you create a karma, but if the external conditions are not coming together, that karma will just be in abeyance until such time as it can manifest. You may have done some act of generosity, and you have the karma to receive some good result, but that specific result is not available in your circumstances at this time, but at some point in the future it will be, and then you can experience it. Next one. I am studying the science of gratitude. The best practice is to recollect when you receive thanks or witness someone else receiving thanks. Can you imagine Buddha's memory of eons of thanks? Yes, that would be profound. Can we access this plane of consciousness during our meditation? I'm not sure which plane of consciousness you're referring to. We can access the plane of consciousness of the Brahmas, the Rupa Bhumi, by being in jhana. It's not advisable to seek out the unconscious realm. That's considered a mistake. And we can't experience anagami, the Suddhāvāsa level, unless we become anagamis. How could one visualize Pure Lands as a recollection of Dewa practice? You can visualize it as just as well as any of the other realms. Imagine a very beautiful, clear, clean, park-like environment, and these very peaceful, sublime Dewas enjoying their state of enlightenment. If one investigates the Four Noble Truths, Noble Eightfold Path, three characteristics on a daily basis, but deems some of the text out there as not relevant or even superstitious, or one derailed from the path to higher understanding? No, of course not. The teachings that you mentioned are really the core. I would only add to that maybe the dependent origination. Those are the core teachings. Those are the things that are important. Not as many creepy crawlies in South America as in Thailand. Okay. Lucky for you. Next, during your Brahma realm stream, I mentioned a dream I had about seeing vibrant beings in space. I feel it was more related to the pure realm you mentioned, because they seem like statues in meditation. There's also a voice that said, this is the realm of unconditionality. Maybe that's, maybe you had spent a lifetime there eons ago, and it's a distant memory coming up. Would it be proper to have a pure abodes practice like the Tibetans have for Tara, but instead visualize Queen Samawati foremost in loving kindness, if we are curious about bhakti devotion for Aryas? I've not really heard of that being done, but I don't think there'd be any harm to developing such a practice. If not many known arhats currently, there may be many more known anagamis. No, there's really no known anagamis or arhats, because they don't generally publicly proclaim to be so. The only thing I can think of specifically is that after his death, Ajahn Lee Damodaro's disciples claimed that he died as an anagami, and that he spoke of that before he died. I've heard that, but I can't even vouch for it for sure. Do the other beings in the pure abodes, not the asanyasatta, experience time in a sense comparable to how we do? Or do they witness our realms arise and pass away as though fast forward? I tend to think they must experience time quite differently than us. And they probably do see the realms bubbling in and out of existence. I'm just kind of speculating here. It seems like if someone has a lifespan of thousands of kappas, that time must have an entirely different meaning for them. How can we know these realms are real rather than propositions or temporal hypotheses? Well, we don't really, and it's not really something that's worth bothering about too much. I mean, it raises, if you really want to get into it, it raises all kinds of questions about what do you mean by being real? How real is this earthly realm? I really, in terms of, in my study of this cosmology, the question of whether they're real or not is one that doesn't, that I find the least interesting, let's say. There's a divine stupa in the pure abodes with offerings for future Buddhists. That's a beautiful gift. Thank you for sharing. How would you visualize that? I would visualize it probably something like a crystal stupa. Something not. It would definitely not be some dull earthly stone. It would be jewels or crystal. And they was circumambulating it. Banners flying, flowers everywhere. Maybe one last question. Can one who has ideological differences in some of the texts but is a devoted follower of the core teachings be ever ordained? Yeah, there's not really a ideological test for ordination. Even in the Vinaya for monks, there's only one. There's one rule that let's say bans or castigates a certain teaching, and that is a monk who teaches that there's no danger in sense desires. He's committing an offense. That's the closest it comes to being kind of demanding any kind of ideological purity. But I think if you don't hold to the core teachings, at least, I don't see how you would survive in the monkhood. You'd become discontented. But there's no requirement to believe all kinds of other things. I'm curious how you and Shadow met. I think that was the kitty's name. Yeah, Shadow was my cat for 13 years. We got her at the shelter. And when we first got her, she was very skittish and nervous and kind of unhappy, but then she gradually became really chill. In the stairs where the Buddha descended from heaven, why was Brahma stairs silver and the day was gold if the Brahmas are higher? I don't know. I don't really. I wondered about that myself. Why that particular symbolism? It may be that silver, being white, is considered a pure, more refined color than gold. That's about the only thing I can think of. Presumably, Sahampati still abides in his realm. Yes, yeah. If he is, as I think, the Mahabrahma, he's still the Mahabrahma of this world. So he would be likely identified with the being that some people would worship as God. Are we in a time when a Buddha or a time when we are straining Arhat? I'm not sure what you. If you straining Arhat, we are still in the Buddha age because the teachings of the last Buddha are still remembered. The next passage from the Dhammapada Sahasrara, what is the sacrificial fire referred to there? Though for 100 years one should tend the sacrificial fire in the forest, yet if only for one moment one should worship those of perfected mind, that worship is better than a century of sacrifice. What the sacrificial fire that's being referred to is the practice of samanas at the Buddhist time, who called jatilas, the fire worshippers, that would maintain a fire all the time, like continually, and they worshipped fire as an element. The Buddha did speak about these realms in the sutta. No, it's not just Abhidhamma. Yeah, he did mention the there are suttas that concern the Suddhāvāsa, and there's mention of the Sanyasatas when he's critiquing the practice of the yogis. So all this cosmology with these different realms, all of it can be found in brief in the suttas, but then all the details, all the colorful details and stories generally come from the commentaries. And then there's some analysis in the Abhidhamma about how various elements relate and so on. Can the devas of pure Abodes travel to every other realm of samsara? I don't know about every other realm, but there are incidents of them traveling to Earth. For example, when they come down to give the Buddha the Bodhisattva his requisites, they were also present at his birth. Bhante, I quite often experience lucid dreams. I find to be nearly indistinguishable from waking reality. Given their profundity, I find it odd the suttas don't seem to mention such experience. Do you have any thoughts on this? Yeah, there's very little about dreaming to be found in the suttas. There's some accounts of prophetic dreams the Buddha had before his enlightenment. For example, in one dream he dreamt that he was lying down with his head resting on the Himalayan mountains and his feet in the southern sea, which he took to be a prediction that his teachings would spread all over Jambudvipa. There's also a brief passage in the Anguttara that talks about dreams on a theoretical kind of level, saying that there are different kinds of dreams. There are those dreams which are visions of the future, those which are visions of the past, and generally taken to mean past lives. There are those dreams which are messages from devas, and there are those dreams which are just wind in the belly. I'm not aware of any discussion in the Buddhist texts about lucid dreaming. There is mention of what we would call astral projection. In the mind is one of the psychic powers. One of the idis is the emergence of a mind-made body that can travel around. What do you make of the Lursi tradition in Thailand? I'm not sure what the Lursi tradition is. I'm not aware of it. Can I be a Buddhist monk who believes in superdeterminism, which is strictly rejected in the suttas, but without providing any logical refutations? Well, if superdeterminism is true and you're destined to be a monk, you're going to be a monk, right? So now I wouldn't. There isn't any, like I said, there isn't any really dogmatic adherence required. Would you aspire to be reborn into Sita or be reborn as a human being so you can share the Dharma with humans who suffer from ignorance? I think that would vary from individual to individual. The highest aspiration is to reach arahantship and not take any form of rebirth. Many many Buddhists do aspire to be reborn into Sita so they can be in the presence of the Bodhisattva. Weren't some relics taken by Devas Brahmas to their realms? If so, do they persist there as such? They transform to match the subtlety of the realm where they were placed. I don't know if they're transformed. I'm not sure if I've ever seen a discussion of that. One of the relics taken by the Suddhāvāsa beings was the Bodhisattva's hair. When he cut his, he had long, as a Kshatriya warrior caste, he grew his hair long, and when he made his great renunciation, he cut it off with his sword. He took his locks in one hand, twisted them into like a pigtail, and cut them off, and threw them in the air, and they were caught by a Suddhāvāsa deity and taken back up to their realm and put in a stupa. How many Buddha dispensations can a pure Abodes Deva live through? And many, many, because the highest level of them have a lifespan of 16,000 kappas. So depending on the number of, but some, actually the majority of kappas will have no Buddhas. Some will have one, some will have 2, 3, 4, up to 5. But in 16,000 kappas of time, there'd be many, many Buddhas that they live through. Does Buddhism lead to Indian supremacy, e.g. language and Buddhist ethnicity? How to deal with this and make it more neutral? I don't know why that's I don't think it leads to anybody's supremacy. Maybe you're referring to the idea that Buddhists will always be reborn in the Ganges Valley. That's just the way it is. They're always enlightened at the Bodhi Mandala. Rishi tradition, white robe lay tradition of medicine man medium. Oh, okay. Yeah, now I have some recognition of that. I didn't recognize the name. Yeah, well, there's all kind of practice of this kind of folk medicine and things. I actually have some experience of that, of seeing that in play, and they do seem to have some pretty profound healing power. I don't think you could take them as teachers of Dhamma. Was the Buddha once returned or stream entered before his birth? He couldn't be a non-returner to Sita because he wouldn't have taken human birth, right? I've never seen any clear discussion of that. If the Buddha was at any stage of enlightenment prior to becoming a Buddha, it would have to be in his last few human births, because the stream enterer can only have 7 births. Given the descriptions of the Buddha's enlightenment night, I tend to think that his entry into Buddhahood was quite different from that of a Sawaka, an ordinary person who follows through the 4 stages. He spent aeons of time perfecting the paramis, and then on his enlightenment night, it never mentions him going through stream entry and so on. What it talks about is the 3 knowledges. Tivijja, the first knowledge of his remembrance of all his past births. Then the second knowledge, the knowledge of seeing the unfolding of samsara in general. And then the third knowledge was the attainment of Buddhahood by the destruction of the deep defilements. Okay, so I'm going to take a few more and I'm going to make an end soon here. Can there ever be an age entirely empty, Suddhāvāsa? Yes, that's actually mentioned specifically. That there may be many long periods of time when no Buddhas arise, so no one hears the teachings, no one becomes an anagami, and it said that sometimes the Suddhāvāsas are completely empty. That's actually mentioned in one of the texts. Are the pure abodes similar to the pure lands of Vajrayana? Yes, I believe there is. I think that was the origin of the pure land teaching. The pure abode devas are Brahmas and share their characteristics and traits. They surpass them in all qualities. You said they are like Brahmas associated with fourth jhana. Yes, they are. This specifically mentioned that they're to be classed amongst the fourth jhana Brahmas. It was a development of that. But that does seem to be contradicted by the fact there's stories about them acting in the world. So I don't think they were in a state of immersion all the time. Okay, now I'll take my leave now, and thank you. And we've got one more session in this series to deal with the formless realms, the arupa realms, and then I think we've done with the tour. Okay, I'll take my leave now. Thank you all for coming.